Committee of the Metropolitan Council for June 18th, 2018. Welcome, members of the public, staff, others. Our first item, members, is to approve our agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Our agenda is adopted. Next is approval of our June 4th meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
Move
So moved.
approval. Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there discussion or comments on the minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Our minutes are adopted for June 4th. Members, two items before we jump into our business agenda. The first is that I want to welcome and congratulate Lisa Barajas as our new Community Development Director. Lisa is not a newcomer to the council. She started in 2007 as a planning analyst and a sector rep. And then since 2012 has served as manager of local planning assistance. So those many folks watching the meeting on television, many of them have probably met you in the work that you've done with local partners over many years. So congratulations, welcome aboard as the Community Development Director, and glad to have you here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely. Members, also, I would like to respond to a request from Catherine Zimmer to make some comments about the Regional Parks Policy Plan draft that's been in development for a period of time. This is a atypical measure that we would invite someone to speak on an item not on the business agenda, but wanted to make that opportunity to speak for up to 3 minutes on concerns that you've raised, Ms. Zimmer, about that work. So please, if you would, come forward and introduce yourself, and look forward to your comments.
That's good.
It sure is.
Thank you, Chair Commerce, members of the committee. For those that aren't familiar with me, my name is Catherine Zimmer, and I am the executive director of a fledgling nonprofit called Women Observing Wildlife Minnesota. I am also an environmental health scientist as my day job. And for those that aren't familiar with environmental health, that is that portion of public health that actually looks at how the environment impacts or improves human health. So I will try to stay on task, Chair Commerce. I wanted to mention we all have a bond with nature. You know, and I'm a bike commuter, so I love breathing the fresh air or feeling the wind in my hair, or for some it's just the connection to the greater world by being outside and feeling yourself move under your own power when you're on wheels. Or maybe it's the sweet song of a goldfinch, or the iridescence of a bluebird, or admiring the coral and yellow feet of a painted turtle, or catching a glimpse of a fox or an owl or a coyote. For a lot of us, it's enjoying the ripples and the quiet on the water and appreciating the beauty of a perch or a bluegill or a crappie, or even if you're lucky, a walleye, and then relishing its delicious flesh. So we all have a connection, and some more intimate than others, but we all need nature for the services it provides. It cleans the air and water, provides food, fuel, livelihoods, medicines, spiritual and cultural beliefs. Disturbingly, though, the nature that we have coexisted with for almost 2 million years is in dire straits. The World Wildlife Fund report, The Living Planet, states that vertebrate species, that is, amphibians, birds, fish, mammals, and reptile populations have declined almost 60% in the last 40 years. That's since I became an adult. We've lost 60% of those vertebrate species. The key cause is habitat loss. That is, they no longer have adequate space for food, harborage, or the ability to raise their young, primarily due to the exploding human population. We have an opportunity to protect and support nature in our regional parks. As you know, many of the parks were set aside due to unique natural features such as tamarack swamp or tallgrass prairie, and they are our gateways to nature. They provide the natural resources that are, according to the Regional Parks Policy Plan, the foundation of prosperity. We have attended the Metropolitan Parks Open Space Commission meetings for the past 3 years. During that time, we've noticed that a number of improvements could be made to the regional parks policy or the regional park system that would help achieve the thrive outcomes of equity, all people need nature, livability, prosperity, and stewardship. We suggest the addition of the strategies that call for we suggest the addition of strategies that call for balancing legacy spending, including maintenance costs, ecological review, and natural resource goals.
Ms. Zimmer, I'd like to ask you to conclude if you would.
I'm
Thanks.
on my last paragraph.
Okay.
So these strategies are laid out in more detail in this morning's email that I believe all of you received. We ask that you seriously consider these strategic additions to the Regional Parks Policy Plan. We have an imperative to protect the biodiversity on which all life depends. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members, let's turn our attention to our business agenda. The first item is item 2018-160. It's a approval of grant recommendations for Livable Communities Act TBRA funds. Marcus Martin is here to present the recommendations. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for placing this item on your agenda. So I will begin with a staff recommendation. The recommendation is that the Metropolitan Council award 16 tax-based revitalization account grants totaling $3,265,300 to assist redevelopment projects in the cities of Burnsville, Hastings, Hopkins, Maple Grove, Minneapolis, and St. Paul, and authorize its Community Development Director to execute the grant agreements on behalf of the Council. So as you all know, the purpose of the account is to clean up contamination for redevelopment sites that will increase the tax base and add jobs or affordable housing units for cities that are participating in the LCA program. The account is also supposed to take into account the highest benefits for the costs incurred and look at funding from other partners. So we offered 3 categories of funding this cycle: investigation grants, cleanup grants, and seed grants. The seed grants allow for investigating and abatement, asbestos abatement, and lead-based paint abatement with properties within areas of concentrated poverty. The criteria follows the Livable Communities Distribution Plan that was adopted back in March. So what did we get in response to our funding opportunity? We received 28 applications requesting $7.9 million for projects located in Bloomington, Burnsville, Fridley, Hastings, Hopkins, Maple Grove, Minneapolis, Plymouth, and St. Paul. Those are shown in blue in the map. Most of the requests were for cleanup, but we did receive 3 investigation grant requests and 4 seed grant requests. About $300,000 of the amount requested was for projects that ended up being ineligible. So how much could we spend? With some additional funding remaining from the TBRA TOD grant categories, there is just over $3.5 million to spend. So I have a correction to the slide there that shows that $3.2 million is actually the amount we were recommending for funding, not the amount awarded if you add up that column on the right. The account is oversubscribed, but we're not recommending funding for all of the funding be used, and that is because of some of the geographic funding limits. and also the low evaluation scores for some of the projects. But in order to maximize the number of projects that we can fund or partially fund, we are recommending adding a small amount to the total. Let's take a look at those funding limits. If it's high demand for the funds, up to 75% of the funding can go to Minneapolis and St. Paul. The cumulative funding recommended for Minneapolis and St. Paul in this cycle is 66% of the total available, and that would be 73% of the total awarded. So this statutory limit has been met. There is an additional limit. Up to 50% of the funding can go to a single community when there's a high demand for the funding. So adding that small amount of funding, that $82,400 from the TBRA TOD, would allow us to meet this limit and fund one more project. There's still a balance remaining, and the reason for that is that there aren't other projects outside the city of Minneapolis that met our minimum score. So we are funding all the other projects that did meet the score. So thinking about the scoring criteria and those funding limits, the following table shows the results of the project evaluations. They are in descending order from the evaluation. Include the request amount, other public funding requests, and the amount recommended. So the following 8 cleanup projects are recommended for TBRA funding. Andai Young Supportive Housing, $47,200. West Broadway Curve, $206,300. The former Superior Plating Phase 2, $880,000. Sons of Norway, $410,100. 12th Street Tower, $150,800. 13250 Grove Drive, $36,400. Snelling and St. Clair, $150,000. Minnesota Chemical, $328,200. Let's turn now to the investigation grants. We're also recommended funding for 4 investigation grants. Checkerboard, $50,000. 7th and Bush, $30,700. Riverfront Edition, $23,700. And Valley Ridge, $29,800. So I'd like to make a comment about the Valley Ridge. The Valley Ridge project was originally submitted to us as a cleanup, but it was more suited for an investigation grant because we needed more information about the shallow soils and the future placement of the buildings on that site. We also are recommending grants for the seed category. So here are the 4 seed grants. Cold storage, $805,700. Second and Van White, $49,300. Impound West, $44,700. 617 Stryker, $22,400. The cold storage site includes investigation and a large amount of asbestos abatement within a very large industrial building, and the other requests in this category are focusing on environmental investigation. So if the recommendation were approved, we'd have $77,900 in seed funding to award in the next cycle in November. So let's look at the projects that were not recommended for funding. There are 10 projects that we are not recommending for funding. 2 of the projects, Bassett Creek East and Calhoun Towers, did score high enough in the evaluation to be considered for funding, but because of those statutory limits, we cannot recommend funding for those. 2 of the projects were not eligible for funding. That is the Bloomington Central Station and Marshall Apartments. In those projects, the total environmental costs were less than 1% of the total development costs. Thus, they didn't meet our needs criteria, our needs test, to be eligible for funding. And 8 of the projects did not meet our minimum score required to be recommended for funding.
Councilmember Elkins, you have a question?
Yeah, can you go back one, Marcus, for
Yep.
just a second? What was it that disqualified the Bloomington Central Station project?
It was that ratio of the need. So looking at the total cost, in that case, it was a request for asbestos abatement. It was less than 1% of their total development costs.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Other questions?
I don't think so. Please continue.
All right, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Councilmember
I did have a
Cunningham.
question at the same time.
Okay.
I was wondering, so the cities provide a list of their priorities to us as a part of this. So in order for a project to get here, they have to be recommended by a city. Is that correct?
No,
Or-
in
okay.
this case, the cities provide a resolution of support for each project with their application, but they do not provide a priority ranking.
Okay, okay. I was just trying to see if there was some issue that cities might have prioritized, but they didn't had any type of prioritization, any of the cities for these projects.
That's correct.
Okay. All right.
Shown here are the cumulative expected benefits to the region if the staff recommendation is approved. Gains are expected in the tax base, in housing, including some affordable units, as well as the commercial and industrial space. So I'll go back to the staff recommendation. The recommendation is that the Metropolitan Council awards 16 tax-based revitalization account grants totaling $3,265,300 to assist redevelopment projects in the cities of Burnsville, Hastings, Hopkins, Maple Grove, Minneapolis, and St. Paul, and authorize the Community Development Division Director to execute the grant agreements on behalf of the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Other questions, council members? Additional questions? Councilmember Munt.
Mr. Chair, Marcus, I'm really excited to see the cold storage site in Hopkins on the list. I think there's tremendous potential there for development.
Thank you. I think we agree that that's a very interesting project. It has a lot of promise.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Can
Councilmember
you
Dorfman.
just, thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you remind me what kind of criteria is applied or ratings applied to the affordable housing component on these projects when you're determining eligibility and funding?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the question. In general, the affordable housing is one of about 9 scoring criteria. It accounts for 25 points of the total, but it is balanced with the jobs category. The statute calls for jobs or of affordable housing. We consider affordable units those that are at or below 80% of the area median income. Individual projects can opt for projects that are units that are affordable below that area median income range.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Councilmember Munt.
Mr. Chair, Marcus, I'm curious if there's a process where you loop back with the 8 applicants that didn't meet the minimum criteria.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. The correspondence goes out in terms of the recommendation. There's an open invitation for folks to talk about the staff recommendation. That went out last week. So we do offer that either before, right now, at this time, but also in the future before the next funding cycle.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, these projects, I think, are outstanding recommendations. I think emblematic of the list is the Superior Plating Phase 2 project. And when I was looking through the uses that have been, contaminating over time, coal yards, fuel companies, sheet metal works, gas station. This is a great workhorse program, and there's not much missing from that list of contaminating uses. Maybe a dry cleaner,
That's true.
but to redeploy that land as residential use in that case, I think is a great sort of example of what this program can do regionally. So I would entertain a motion, members, if you think it's appropriate.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion to the motion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, our next item is item 2018-161, comprehensive plan amendment for the city of Eagan for a 176-unit senior care facility. Riaz Mealy is here. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to present to you the Eagan Senior Living Comprehensive Plan Amendment, and as Mr. Chair explained, is for a senior housing project. Okay. So, as shown in the Figure 1 of the staff report, Thrive MSP 2040 gives the City of Eagan a community designation of suburban. Excuse me. The area affected by the amendment is shown in red on this map and has a little bit of a little cloud there. And it is at the intersection of Yankee Doodle Road and Lexington Avenue. As shown in Figure 2 of the staff report, this map shows the regional systems in relation to the amendment site, and none of the regional systems components are within half a mile of the amendment site. This is just as shown in Figure 3 of the staff report. The amendment site is currently guided as business park, and the proposal is to change that to high-density residential, and the high-density residential land use category has a density of at a minimum of 12 units per acre. So it's 12 units or more. So staff find that this amendment conforms to the regional system plans, is consistent with council policies, and is compatible with the plans of affected and adjacent jurisdictions. And with that, our proposed action is to adopt the attached review record and allow the City of Eagan to place the senior living comprehensive plan amendment into effect, find that the amendment does not change the city's forecast, and advise the city to implement the advisory comments in the review record for housing and transit. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there questions, council members? Okay. I would entertain a motion in that case.
So moved. Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion to the motion. Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Our next item is 2018-163, Regional Parks Capital Grant Agreement Authorizations. And Heather Augustin-Hebner is here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. Council authorization is required for the regional administrator to execute all agreements in excess of $500,000. We are requesting authorization to develop and execute 7 grant agreements totaling just over $21 million with regional parks implementing agencies. A list of specific projects and grant amounts can be found on attachment 1. These projects have already gone through all the normal council processes and are also in the authorized capital program. Regional parks projects advance livability by enhancing the quality of life in the region through increasing access to natural and outdoor recreation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Questions, council members? I would entertain a motion if there's no questions. Councilmember Wolf?
Move approval, Mr. Chair, with the comment that having some of our regional park agencies go through a side run around the normal allocation continues to be a frustration to me. We're sending $15 million as a pass-through to the city of St. Paul for Como Zoo, and that's more than the entire bonding allocation for the regional park system, so.
Point is well taken. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
It's been seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Our next item is 2018-136, Highway 5 Regional Trail Master Plan in Carver County. Raya is back. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mhm.
Again, good afternoon. Before you, we have the Highway 5 Regional Trail Master Plan that is in Carver County. Looking at the system map, the Highway 5 Regional Trail will be located on the northeastern side of the Carver County, and it travels about 8.9 miles through the cities of Chanhassen and Victoria. It was identified as a regional trail search corridor in the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, and Carver County completed a master planning process for this trail, identifying the alignment that is within this master plan, and this trail is identified as a linking trail. It has been it's an off-road alternative for people to use for commuting, basically, and it connects downtown Chanhassen to Minnesota Landscape Arboretum, and from there, it goes to Minnetonka LRT Regional Trail. It also connects to some local trails and parks along the way. This is basically the alignment of the trail. There are two locations identified in the master plan that need agreements with property owners for trail development, and it might be a little difficult to see it on the map. The two areas are identified as Area A and Area B, where there's a little bit of text. Area A is where additional land at the southeast corner of Highway 41 and Highway 5 intersection is needed to provide additional space for the trail and underpass. And then Area B is basically the blue portion of the trail on this map. That's where an agreement with the University Board of Regents is needed to develop the trail within the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum. The development concept is that it provides access to downtown Chanhassen, Minnesota Landscape Arboretum, Minnetonka LRT Regional Trail. It's walking, biking, skating, anything non-motorized, unless identified, such as police vehicles. It's going to be, for the most part, a 10-foot wide paved trail, and it will include wayfinding signage, kiosk, rest stops, and traffic signage. And for the planning purposes, it is divided into 6 segments. I am just going to show you a overall map of the segments. They're kind of like the color alternates between the segments, so you can kind of see the different segments. That's just for the ease of planning. And 2 of the segments have alternate routes identified for less impact to the wetlands, and also one of them is an interim underpass until the Carver County is able to actually implement the entire underpass, which is a new addition. Then at the end of on the very eastern side of the trail, the regional trail ends at the border of Hennepin County and Carver County, but that is where it connects to 1.9 miles of additional local trails. So it has potential for users to continue their route. This is an overall look at the estimated project construction costs. Again, these are divided by segments, as I explained a little bit, but the total estimated construction costs is, it also includes the 20% contingency for design and engineering as well. So that's where the just above $6 million comes in. The subtotal preferred route is about 4,300,000. So the proposed findings is that the master plan is consistent with the requirements of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, and it is consistent with Planning Strategy 1 and other council policies. So before you, our proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council approve the Highway 5 Regional Trail Master Plan and also require that Carver County, prior to initiating development of the regional trail, send preliminary plans to Scott Dents, our Inspector Engineering Manager at the Metropolitan Council Environmental Services, for review in order to assess the potential impacts to the regional interceptor system. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions, council members? Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'm very excited to see this. It's a great project, I think, that they're working on and getting the building blocks in place for. My only question I had was, what's the process of getting the agreement across the Arboretum space? Like, what next steps happen there?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Barber, that is something that the Scott County is working with the University Board of Regents in terms of coming to an agreement and signing an MOU and potentially going into a joint powers agreement, which is something that the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan also recommends, that the park implementing agency get into joint power agreements with anyone who potentially owns the land and has that land use authority basically over it. So they're working closely with the University Board of Regents, and the university is also very excited to have this trail go within the landscape arboretum.
Great, thank you.
Questions, council members?
I move the agenda item.
Okay, it's been moved.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Discussion to the motion. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Our next item is 2018-137, a request for future reimbursement for 5 projects from Dakota County. And Deb Jensen is here for the next 2 items. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members. Today and over the next few CDC meetings, we'll be bringing you recommendations that include authorization for future reimbursement consideration. So today we're providing a brief refresher on this funding mechanism because it has a funny name and I'm not sure that anyone outside of regional parks understands it. There are 2 primary situations in which future reimbursement consideration is used. One for regional parks development projects and one for park acquisition grants. This first item focuses on a request for future reimbursement for 5 development projects. As part of the normal bonding process, agencies provide a list of their proposed projects. The council reviews those projects and forwards the appropriation request to the Minnesota Office of Management Budget. The legislature then acts, and if bonds are appropriated, the council matches every $3 in state bonds with $2 in regional bonds. We add the projects to our authorized capital budget, typically in June or July. The appropriations are usually available on July 1st, and agencies can begin work immediately after the funds are available. So start to finish, this process takes about a year. Sometimes, however, the agencies have development projects that need more prompt action. If a road washes out, for example, an agency needs to address it. Or if an opportunity arises to save money by capitalizing on an economy of scale, it may cost taxpayers more for the agency to wait for the normal bonding process to make funds available. This is where future reimbursement consideration comes into play. This process allows agency more flexibility by authorizing them to move forward on development projects at their own risk, with the possibility of reimbursement through a future bonding appropriation. In this process, the agency notifies the council that a need or opportunity has arisen. With all the rain we've had lately, let's use a hypothetical project that involves repairing a trail after a washout. The agency would submit a request to the council that we agree to consider reimbursing the agency up to a set dollar amount at some point in the future for for the washout repair done in the present. After receiving the council's approval, the agency can go ahead and fix the washout. Then, in a future bonding proposal, the agency makes a decision to use some of its normal share of state bonds, of the bonding appropriation, as reimbursement for the cost to fix the washout. These funds can only be used through council dollars. So we have the match to state bonds and regular state bonds. We cannot use state bonds for reimbursement projects because statute won't allow us. The council analyzes all of the bonding proposals and determines whether it has sufficient room within its match limit to fund the requested reimbursements. If so, the reimbursement project moves forward as a part of the agency's bonding allocation. The requesting agency does not receive any more or any less funding through these future reimbursements. They're calculated as a part of the agency's normal share. For this particular request, Dakota County has asked the council to consider reimbursing it for 5 projects. We have reviewed the projects and found the proposed work eligible for bonds. The request for the Mississippi River Regional Trail will close a gap in the trail in Rosemount, making a full 25-mile connection between South St. Paul and Hastings. The project will utilize wayfinding to assist those who don't speak English and will use universal design to meet or exceed ADA requirements. The Whitetail Woods project includes natural resource restoration, improvements to the camper cabin campus, trail improvements, shade structures, and an accessible boardwalk and a trail around Empire Lake. The Billsby project entails improvements at Echo Point, including a lakeside deck, a fishing dock, boat slips, beach enhancements, and a canoe launch to the river. This project will enhance year-round access to the trails and access to the lakeshore for people of differing abilities. The 4th project will construct trail bridge over the Union Pacific Railroad and build a 1,500-foot segment on the Mississippi River Regional Trail. Will also extend the Big Rivers Regional Trail to the Lilydale Regional Trail. The 5th project will build the 2-mile Egan segment of the Minnesota River Greenway Regional Trail. The 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan is very specific about the requirements for a given project to be approved for future reimbursement consideration. The project must be consistent in timing, scale, type, and cost for the pertinent council-approved master plan. The request must be made to the council before work begins on the project, and then the council must approve the project. These projects have met all 3 of these requirements. Some years ago, staff worked with the Office of General Counsel to craft standard language for these business items. You'll see that as the 2nd bullet in the recommendation. Staff therefore recommends the council approve future reimbursement consideration for the 5 capital projects listed in Table 1 of the business item for Dakota County Regional Park and Trails. And here's the part that's standard all the time. Inform Dakota County that the council does not under any circumstances represent or guarantee that future reimbursement will be granted, and expenditure of local funds never entitles an agency to reimbursement. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, council members?
Move approval?
Second.
Any discussion of the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, council members.
Thank you. Next item is 2018-138 Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund Grant for Spring Lake Park Reserve.
This item also includes a request for future reimbursement consideration, but in this case, it's being requested to offset Dakota County's local share for a property acquisition. This property is an in-holding within Spring Lake Park Reserve, which is along Spring Lake and the Mississippi River in northeastern Dakota County. Here's a more detailed view of the property's location. It's in that bend in the river. The property has complicated property lines with a notable carve-out near the north end of the property where the DNR owns one area for a water access point. So it's that kind of little niche that is up near the top on the west side. The black and white trail that meanders through the property is the Mississippi River Regional Trail. The 72-acre property has 1,750 feet of shoreline on Spring Lake. It's heavily forested with oak, woodland, and savanna. It also has steep slopes and ravines on 90-foot-high bluffs. 3,000 feet of Mississippi River Regional Trail have already been constructed through the property. We have 4 images of the property and its views of the lake for you. The first view is looking southwest from a lookout along the Mississippi River Regional Trail. The second is an image of Hillary Path, which runs through the property. This image is looking south and west from the DNR public access. And the final image is looking north from an outlook along the regional trail. Unlike most of our acquisitions, this property was acquired by Dakota County through condemnation after negotiations to purchase the property outright failed. This property has been in the condemnation process for several years. As a part of acquiring property through this method, the acquiring agency must notify the council of its intent to acquire property through condemnation. That notice was given in 2015. To gain an accurate value opinion for the court to consider, the property owners requested that the county wait until after the trail was constructed before getting its appraisal done. With the trail now built, the court finished its deliberations in May. The stipulation and settlement were signed on May 8th, and the grant was formally requested on that same day. The cost of this property totals nearly $4.5 million. The 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan limits any given agency to receiving no more than $1.7 million from each of the 2 Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund accounts. So an agency is eligible for up to $1.7 million from the Park and Trails Legacy Fund account and another $1.7 from the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund account. ENRTF money cannot be used for condemnations, so Dakota County is limited to its share in Parks and Trails Legacy funds. However, the county also had a previous legacy PAOF grant this state fiscal year, so only just under $1.6 million is available for this grant. The county is requesting $1,594,630 in grant funding, of which $956,778 comes from legacy and $637,852 from council bonds. County has requested that the balance of the cost, including the county's 25% match and all costs above the $1.7 million limit, as a future reimbursement consideration. This request is consistent with the policy plan, the master plan for Spring Lake Park Reserve, and all of the requirements of the legacy acquisition account. Therefore, staff recommends that the council approve $1,594,630 to Dakota County to acquire the Sorg Trust parcels along Hillary Path in Nenninger Township for Spring Lake Park Reserve, to authorize the Community Development Director to execute the grant agreement and restrictive covenant on behalf of the council, to consider reimbursing Dakota County for up to $1,750,553 from its share of a future Regional Parks Capital Improvement Program for costs associated with the Sorg Trust acquisition, and inform Dakota County that the council does not under any circumstances represent or guarantee that future reimbursement will be granted an expenditure of local funds never entitles a park agency to reimbursement. With that, I'll take any questions you might have.
You're ready for TV and radio. Council members, questions?
Mr. Chair, I'd move this matter.
Okay, it's been
Second.
moved, seconded. Is there discussion of the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you kindly.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, members. That concludes our business agenda. And we do not have information items this evening. Just thinking about, in terms of bringing these recommendations to the full council, I think I would propose that items 1 and 3 go on the council's business agenda, and items 2, 4, 5, and 6 go on consent agenda, if that suits the will of the committee.
Who does? Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Councilmember Cunningham.
I came in late, so I apologize for that, but I just noticed that we have a new person sitting to your right, and I was just wondering if you wanted to make any comments about that.
Well, I will tell you that you missed out on my comments.
I apologize.
Not at all. I'm very pleased that Lisa's joined us as Community Development Director, and As I said at the beginning of the meeting, she is not a stranger to the council, is very seasoned in the work of the very diverse work of the Community Development Division, and I think he's going to do a great job. So,
Here, here.
Thank you.
well, council members, I think with that, I think we can be adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
You.